right, welcome one and all to the next event of the 4th annual Easton Book Festival. My name is Chris Phillips, I'm president of the board, and I will be moderating this panel on banned books. It is just a delight to have this back in person in Easton this year, and I'd like to start by thanking, we have quite a list of sponsors this year, particularly Lafayette College, Greater Easton, GEDP, Pre-K for PA, Fidelity Bank, Kelly Nissan, and we have a program brochure with many lists. It's amazing to have so many community partners working with us this year. And I'm also very pleased to briefly introduce the other participants in this panel. Andy Latees, who is the executive director for the festival and the proprietor of Book and Puppet, another key sponsor of the festival. Lynn Alexander, who is sometimes here as an author, sometimes as a publisher, sometimes as a moderator. She's very involved in the Lehigh Valley poetry scene and is also one of our vice presidents on the board. And Eileen O'Brennan has come straight from Story Hour today to talk with us about her perspective on banned books as well. So with that, Andy, do we want to start with John Evans, since he's not here? We can pick up. John is another member of the board and one of the leaders of the Greater Lehigh Valley Writers Guild, or GLIVWIG, and he was not able to attend, but sent Andy some remarks that he wanted to share.
Yes, John sent this statement. Children the world over grow up believing in Santa Claus. And yet, without reading a newspaper or book, simply by moving through life with open eyes and open mind, they reach the conclusion that Santa does not exist. Blocking access to ideas, facts, and opinions is an attempt to create artificially narrow and closed minds. That should never be the goal of parents, schools, or a government whose most cherished ideal is freedom. Thank you, John. I love that.
Thank you, John, and thank you, Andy, for ventriloquizing.
Thank you.
So, Andy, I don't know if you have any...
I would be happy to continue. So I've been running bookstores now since the mid-'80s, and during that period, the American Booksellers Association created the American Booksellers Foundation for Free Expression. And of course, booksellers, especially independent booksellers, have been proud champions of the idea of freedom of expression. It seems like a fairly basic concept in American life because of the First Amendment to the Constitution, but it's actually very complicated because of the issue of hate speech, which is something that the government and the legal system have recognized as a critical issue when we examine the question of freedom of speech. So freedom of speech is a contested issue because there are definitional problems. Everyone knows that, for instance, you can't shout fire in a crowded theater. So there's types of speech which can be problematic. And it's that issue which causes these fights over book banning. Now, there have always been arguments about what books should be allowed and what books should not be allowed in this country. And in general, the public will decide, and it's impossible to really suppress a good book. Even in countries that have that run dictatorships that try to control thought, like Soviet Russia, publications circulated in hand-typed versions, the samizdat, and people read in a sort of underground manner. So I think it's impossible to really suppress a book that people want to read. I have been selling children's books for most of my career, and it's in the area of children's books that book banning is most lively. Unfortunately, some parents feel that because they don't want their child to read a certain book, that they will take it upon themselves to prevent all children from having access to that book that they don't want their child to read. And this is a really big problem, especially when we have public education in our society, so that all the parents are sending their children to schools that we all collectively pay for. Well, what books should be there? That's something that it's terrific to have professional librarians and professional educators who are involved with the field of children's literature and the advances in education, making decisions like that for their school. And when an individual parent decides that they don't like a particular book in a library, and that parent makes a big fuss at a school board meeting, then that's an opportunity for the school board to say, you know, this is an arena for professionalism, and a single parent should not prevent other children from having access to a book that our librarians and our teachers thought this is a good book to have in this school. So that's a big problem right now in this country. Independent bookstores, of course, privately owned companies don't have to worry about this, and I'm happy to sell books that are being actively attacked in the schools. And sometimes, just recently, this past year, the book Mouse by Art Spiegelman, published in 1992, winner of a Pulitzer Prize, was attacked and was removed from school in Tennessee. And the publisher, Random House, started giving copies away. Bookstores around the country started giving copies away. The sales of the book boomed. And it's true that sometimes authors say, well, I want my book to be banned because then I'll sell better, because there's all kinds of publicity that depends. But that is not really how authors feel. I have a friend, Jerry Kraft in New York, who wrote a book called The New Kid, a graphic novel about his experience have you read The New Kid? Well, that's just a story about his life growing up. And it was banned in Texas. And he won the Newbery Medal for that book, and it was banned. And when he was interviewed, they asked him, are you glad that it was banned? Because now it's going to sell more. And he said, oh no, I'm not glad it's banned. I would be happy to sell it the regular way. So it's important for the citizenry in this country to stand up against, when one person decides they can stop lots of other people from reading a book, we have to say, that's not okay. People can choose for themselves. It's just like John said in his email. People can choose for themselves what they want to read. And if a parent thinks that a kid shouldn't read a book, well, that's your family. And but you can't tell other people and other families what to read. So I'm very lucky that I work running bookstores, and I love running bookstores. But I do have strong feelings about people trying to ban books. Did you have a question?
Yeah. So in my school, we have this section called Young Adult, and I read one of the series in there called Heartstopper, and it's amazing. But I can't read it again because apparently I'm too young. Do you think that's book banning or not?
Well, I disagree with that idea, and I know there's a series of those, right? Yeah, so you read the first one and they said you weren't allowed to read the next ones?
Oh, I read all of them, but they were like, and then I asked, can I read it again? And they were like, nada.
Well, you know something? When my daughter was in 6th grade, she read some, and she's sitting right there, she read some books which the teachers thought were not appropriate, and one of the teachers asked to look at the book. And you gave it to the teacher, and then later you noticed the teacher had never given it back to you. So sometimes teachers do that, and I really think that is not okay. I think kids should be able to read a book on their own. So I'm sorry that happened to you.
Thanks.
Great, thank you, and thanks so much for that question. One of the things that hopefully will start to come out as we get further into this panel is how many different experiences people have had with various gradations of book banning, censorship, limiting of access in various ways. Eileen, would you be interested in sharing a few thoughts?
Sure. So, a couple of years ago, I was asked to do Drag Queen Storytime, and is this? Hello. Am I good? Okay. Can everybody hear me? Yes. In the back? Okay. So when I was asked to do it, I was like, sure. It was Christmas time, and I was like, well, I'll come as Mrs. Claus, and we can read some Christmas books. and pass out some cookies and have a good morning, just, you know, having a good time. And somebody in Bethlehem posted on a Facebook group that this was disgusting and terrible, and it caused quite the scene, which was quite, like you had said about banning a book and it sells more. We were at fire code capacity in the building, and we actually had Bethlehem police there because people were making threats and for the safety of me, because what parents see is I am a terrible person, and what children see is, oh my goodness, look at that princess. And so typically I will get ready at home, and one day I was leaving for an event and my neighbors were having a picnic, and one of their younger relatives was there, and he goes, what's all over your face? And I go, oh, well, I'm an actor, I'm going to work. That's so cool. So I, like, when I read to the children, I have a whole slew of books I read this morning, and they're all just basically about everybody's the same and everybody's different all at the same time. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, one of them I read this morning was about houseplants, because I'm a crazy houseplant person, and all of those have different needs. So some people need extra light, some don't. So I think what I do is I just read books that are for everybody, to show that everybody's different, but everybody that's okay that everybody's different, and that everybody needs love, but as long as you're happy, that's the important part. So, and it is such a hot topic subject right now that kids shouldn't be going to drag anything, and what the kids see is that I'm a pretty princess or a prince, and in my mind, like, I don't see it any different than somebody going to a birthday party and having a clown do a balloon animal, because let's be real, I look like a clown. Nobody's hair is this big and wears an outfit like this, for the most part. But
It's awesome.
it really is about just having fun for me, like, and spreading positivity. Like, I gave everybody that was there this morning got a coloring sheet, and if you'd like afterwards, if you're into coloring, there are extra copies of coloring sheets over at Book and Puppet Co. I don't know why I was blanking there. So yeah, that's my take on it. So if anybody has anywhere else that they would like to do one, reach out to me. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, all that.
Thank you very much. Lynn, did you have anything you'd like to chime in?
Well, of course. Yes.
I know you have stories.
Of course. So, you know, there's a difference between parents and families giving guidance and answering questions and talking about difficult subjects and controlling society and controlling what people have access to. I mean, I absolutely got my hands on things as a child, and you know, I came from the age of Judy Blume was big. People were going after Judy Blume when I was a kid. And, you know, I went to my parents and we talked about it and we had a discussion, and I'm glad, honestly, that I had parents who stepped up to do that and saw that as their responsibility, not authority's responsibility to control me and what I had access to. And I feel very strongly that having the ability to think about what we're exposed to ask questions is how we learn. And you know, it's very dangerous to control access. You know, you have to ask yourself, what are you so afraid of? What are we so afraid of about having conversations and having difficult talks about things? You know, why are we so afraid of that? You know, I think that sometimes it comes down to maybe we're afraid of our ability to work through them and answer, you know, honestly. So I think that's part of it, fear. I think it's fear. Whenever we, you know, control, take away, you know, try to control other people, there's fear behind it. And you're using your ability to whether it's school, whether it's, you know, access, you're using that control to control others because you're afraid of something. So.
Yeah. Rebecca.
I had a comment to, and that I think you're absolutely right, and I had a comment about that because, see if how I can put this, now I was thinking it, and now that I'm like on the spot, I'm like, what was I gonna say? The fear is an important factor, but I think too that people think that if they control the information that's available to other people, especially children, that they're going to prevent the bad things that they don't want to happen to those children from happening. And the problem with that is that the bad things are happening. And also good things are happening that maybe our society doesn't agree are good. You know, how many children in our society have a sibling or a parent or a relative or a friend who's might be gay or might be trans or might be, you know, non-binary, or all these different kinds of ways of being in the world. And if we fail to positively embrace the differences that are already there, then we're not protecting children. We're failing to give them the tools to deal with their lives, with the reality of their lives. And I think that the big problem is that there's people out there who are trying to, you know, slam the barn door and lock it behind the cow, and it, you know, in terms of social issues. And they're living in a world where the only way to solve a problem is to control. It's about repressing and suppressing the things that are bad, instead of recognizing that the world is filled with a lot of different kinds of things, good and bad, and maybe, you know, something that's good for one person seems bad to another person, or you know, so that's one part of it. And the other side of that too, or the other component of that, is that if we want to deal with difficult subjects related to children or to women or to people of color, anybody whose power has been diminished in a society that denies them their experience, then we don't improve lives by stopping conversations. We don't improve lives by not letting people speak their truth. We improve lives by empowering people to be able to have a conversation where their truth can be told and where their point of view can be given dignity. And actually, I teach a college at ESU, and one of the other teachers in my department handed me some materials when I started, and one of them was a slideshow about what's the difference between free speech and hate speech. And the difference between free speech and hate speech is free speech opens up and includes more, whereas hate speech shuts people out. And so that's a really good guide to know, you know, where you stand in terms of you know, censorship. That it's like, you know, it's not censorship to say, you know, you can't come in here and, you know, say, you know, make some anti-Semitic remark or bigoted remark, because doing that is actually a way of excluding and shutting people out of the conversation when you start making these kind of definitions and when you start establishing these kind of hierarchies. So that was something that I just wanted to add to the conversation.
Well, I have a comment that's relative to that. Back in the mid-'80s, early '80s, when I was involved in setting up my first children's bookstore, we went and visited the Cooperative Center for Children's Books at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. And this is a place that was very influential in changing the way that children's publishing was done in America. They collected data to try to show how different groups were represented in children's books. And basically, white people were represented in something like, as the characters in 95% of children's books published in the 1980s, and also white boys. Because at the time when I opened my first children's bookstore in 1985, there was a commonplace truth, which was that girls will read books about boys, but boys won't read books about girls. So, if you're a company that makes a book, you should publish a book that has a boy as the main character, because then you can sell you can sell books to boys, and you'll still sell that same book to girls, because the girls will be stuck reading about boys. So that's cheaper. You can make more money if you write books about boys. And that year, when we opened our first children's bookstore in 1985, was the year that the Babysitters Club was started and American Girls was started. And those two series were started by women who were working in the publishing industry, who were fighting against the idea that I just described. And
they were total failures.
They discovered that there was actually a lot of money to be made by breaking that rule. And in the years that have passed, and this is now 37 years since I've been selling children's books, inside of the world of publishing, a complete shift has happened because of pressure from the teachers, and pressure from kids, and pressure from parents, because publishing is a business. The people that make books are in business to make money, and they have to be told, you'll make money if you depict black people, if you depict Latino people, if you depict Native American people, you'll make money. So go ahead and publish these books about, depict other people other than white boys in children's books. And it has been a very, very difficult struggle. But about 8 years ago, an interesting phrase was developed to describe why it's good to have books that depict all kinds of experiences from all different perspectives. And that's the idea of windows and mirrors. The idea is that a book might be a mirror, where any person might want to read a book and see themselves in the book. Okay? And that, therefore, all the different people in the world should have the right to be able to get a book where they see a version of themselves. That makes you feel good. And so a book could be a mirror, or a book could be a window, where you see something that you never saw before. You see people who you've never seen before. You're looking out at the world. And so that's why we need books that show all kinds of different people and the lives, all kinds of different experiences. And most of us love reading books about people who are completely different than us. But we also love reading books in which we see ourselves. So that idea of windows and mirrors has become very helpful for people who are trying to get publishers to make more books that are reflective of more different kinds of experiences. So, yeah, we have to keep pushing. Then we'll get more different kinds of books.
One thing that I'll add in connection with that, I figured we would probably have plenty of things to talk about, but just in case, full disclosure, I'm an English professor at Lafayette College. So what professors like to do when they get on panels is read books so that we have books to talk about. And a book that I found this week at Book and Puppet Company is called The Banned Book Club. And originally I just saw the spine, and I thought, oh, that would probably be interesting to read for this panel. This is a graphic novel by Kim Hyun-suk, Ko Young-ju, and Ryan Estrada. And what it conveys, it sounds like it's going to be this fun kind of teenage conspiracy kind of thing. This is an actual banned book group meeting underground at a university in a small city in South Korea in the 1980s, based on the author's own experiences as students at that university. And this is a time when the US has had plenty of its own versions of Red Scares, and we kind of keep going through, the commies will take care of, wipe everything out unless we do X, Y, and Z. The Red Scare in this book is astonishing. The number of things that are considered by the government to be gateways for communism that you can't do, that you can't have, that you can't touch. And the main character in this story is just a dutiful, trying to make a better life for herself university student who meets a couple of people and they say, hey, why don't you come over and we're going to talk about something. So she picks up one of her favorite novels because she hears it's a book club, and she comes over, and so she's got Nathaniel Hawthorne in her hands. And other people have stuff by Che Guevara and Kim Il-sung and Simone de Beauvoir, and just a really kind of remarkable list of all the things you can't read according to the government in South Korea in the 1980s. And one of the things that really starts to come out of that is that banned books are one piece of a much larger social imaginary and a much larger social phenomenon, because these are students who are reading these banned books because they want access to information that they're being told they can't have. They want access to ideas. A lot of the characters at various times will say, I'm reading these things because I don't understand my world. My world does not make sense, and I need these books so that I can have a shot at trying to get my world to make sense. The government does not want the information, the ideas there, but the other thing the government really does not want is the relationships, the networks that come out of this. Because as various people get stopped by the police at different points, they get searched, they get in trouble because they have a book in their possession, one of the very next things that will be asked is, who do you know? What other names can you give it? Who else is interested in these kinds of things? So it's the information that is part of the fear, but there's also this sense that people will find other people who share common cause, who have a similar experience, who want to share their stories or their ideas in certain ways. And it seems that those relationships might actually be the scariest thing for a lot of people, whether they even get to that consciously or not, about what is it that makes people want to ban books. And so as I'm reflecting on what everyone's been saying here today and thinking about what I was really getting a window into with this book, talk about a book as a window. I learned a lot about 1980 South Korea in about an hour and a half. It's also about how are we finding each other? Who are we finding? And what then is possible because we found each other? That is liberating, transformative, but for some people might also be quite threatening that we're finding each other in various ways. Yes, please.
I read a book about banned books, although right now it seems kind of inferior to that book because it was basically what you described, like the conspiracy thing, except it's really not about books that would, literally none of those books make sense, what you would ban. This Bridge to Terabithia, it's really good, and Captain Underpants. And I'm why would you ban that? And so it's basically about this girl who starts a locker library about all the banned books, and it's really good.
Very cool. Yeah, and again, the wonder of those kinds of books where you have someone creating that kind of resource for other people. It's sharing the information, but again, it's knowing, hey, there are other people out there that want this stuff too. And it doesn't have to be, every single person in town is going to read this or needs to read this or wants to read this, but there might be 10 people who do. And those 10 people should have access to that. And once they have access, maybe there will be 10 more people who would then find they do want to find out about it. And so maybe the whole town does wind up reading it at some point. Thanks. Other stories that people want to share, or comments or questions?
Thank you for that note. I'm thinking about the musician Miles Davis, and one time when they interviewed Miles Davis, they said, "Oh, you should play the blues because your background, the Black history, the suffering." And Miles, he said, "I'm not suffering. My father has a good situation, he's a dentist, and I grew up." But it's what we all talking about, the label, the stereotype. When I came to this country, I remember I came in Pennsylvania, actually, not here, Lancaster. And I stayed there for a couple of months. And as a musician, I didn't see, I would like to be in touch with the musicians. And I didn't see jazz musicians or black musicians around too much. Mm-hmm. Then there was a lecture on spirituality, and at the end of the lecture, I saw a black couple, and I went to them. I was coming from France. I came to them. I said, where's the club? Where's what's happening? The music? Where is it? And I remember the guy said, "Well, I like classical." Then we have to be very careful about, because we all have stereotyped the way we grew up. Mm-hmm. I like strawberry, you don't like strawberry, this one like that, this one. and it's very difficult to detach ourselves from no matter we say, yeah, it's possible to be free, this and that, but in order to be free, like you have, like that famous guy now is on a video, what's his name, Sadhguru. You heard about Sadhguru?
Not sure I know that.
S-A-D-H Guru. I mean, he said you have to let go everything to be able to. I mean, all those Indian teach about the same thing. To let go, to be able to see to be really. Not having any walls, when we talk to people. And it's not easy because we all have our little niche, and it's true what you were saying with that about the fear, people have that fear.
And I think what you said about the walls is important too. I think walls stop us from asking each other what we're afraid of. So I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think that if you've ever asked somebody, what are you afraid of about this book? What is it? That dialogue, it's hard to do that because we're on this side, I'm on this side, and we're always, but sometimes when you do that, I've asked about certain books and parents and people have said, I'm afraid that my child will think it's normal. Will think that this is a normal way to behave if they see it and they see it on Instagram, and they're going to grow up thinking this is normal. Well, so what is normal? This idea that there's one type of, quote, American, one type of person, it's not real. It's a power thing, and we know this. I think all of you guys, we know what's up, but children, I think, need to be able to explore the idea that there is no normal or right or okay or correct religion or correct sexuality, and I think that's where it's scary with kids in particular, because they're developing those ideas. And yeah, I'm afraid my child will think that's normal. I mean, think about that. So I guess I would encourage people to have those conversations, those questions. What's behind that, if you can.
I want to inject a little bit of optimism too into the conversation, which, if you know me, that's kind of out of character for me, but I'll just indulge me for a second. I want to recognize the librarians now, the school librarians especially, who are under fire. If you read the New York Times, there's an article about Martha Hickson, who is a librarian at North Hunterdon High School, who refused to take books off the shelves. I believe the LGBTQ books and other books that are being they're under attack. And it's just, I guess it's just kind of a scary time for librarians now. I mean, I don't know, should librarians be afraid right now for what's happening?
For teachers.
Well, and I'm an English teacher as well.
Teachers are afraid, afraid of your job, right? That's how I don't want to say that's how they get you, but that's how it works. Make you afraid of your job, to speak out, to be alone in your community, to be out there, fighting something all on your own. That's where community comes in. And I always kind of try to take it back there. That's where supporting, even having this discussion, this is community, this is support. We support one another in these conversations, and I think we need to do that with librarians, teachers, booksellers, performers, professors, moms, whoever, as community. So I agree. I think optimism, I think that's, I'm hopeful, because we are seeing pushback. So.
Yeah, it sometimes reaches the level of cliche, but that, Mr. Rogers' line, when things look really bad, look for where the helpers are. Because I think the librarians, the teachers are really doing incredibly important work right now. And
it's weird to feel subversive when you're closing your classroom door and saying, I've got a book for us to read,
Yeah, right.
Right, yeah, it's like we're fooling them all somehow.
I wanted to just also bring up another aspect of the book banning that's been going on, that's been carried out on the conservative end of late, one of the ways that libraries and schools and other institutions are fighting back is by basically, and school boards are fighting back against the kind of hysteria activism is by requiring the people who are proposing to ban a book to actually read the book and write a book report on it and like point out which page the objectionable material is on. And you know what, when they did that, almost all of the complaints stopped, because it turns out that they weren't actually, that the things that they were complaining about, they were being told by pundits who just wanted to like rile people up. This is obscene and this is bad and this is horrible, and they had never even read a book. They just wanted something to be upset about. So, you know, it's like, you know, that's the irony of it, is people who want to ban books that they've never even read, and to say, oh, well, I don't want to read that, it's obscene. It's like, okay, come on, just you have to point out what it is you object to, because otherwise all you're doing is spreading a rumor that has no basis and using it as the basis to take away somebody else's rights. And it's absolutely crazy. Yes. You had something to say. I'm calling on you as a
Well, hi there.
Hi
We've talked quite a bit about, well, where to begin with this. Well, we've talked about the sorts of books that are being banned, and there's a hubbub about critical race theory. There's a hubbub about LGBTQ issues, and the notion, I would suppose, is to try to preserve the existing social hierarchy so everybody stays in their place, everybody stays where they belong, be it in the closet or at the bottom of the food chain. And the danger, of course, and I do use quotation marks there, of publishing these books is showing people that it's not all so, and maybe their neighbors aren't so scary, and maybe their history does need re-examining. But more so, when we have a don't say gay policy, if you will, we're not just depriving the general population of knowing who their neighbors are and knowing what the world is like. We are depriving at-risk students of the vocabulary to understand themselves,
Yes.
to understand that they are okay and can work through their feelings.
Absolutely, yeah.
And another aspect of it is that the reason why people are so scared is because the hate is being manufactured for political reasons.
Yeah.
You know, like people like Tucker Carlson on Fox News will tell you that transgender people are out to get your children, and to that they're all child molesters, and they made a bill that just by exposing a child to a transgender person or a drag queen is child abuse. I mean, the bill won't pass, but
Let's hope.
but I mean, for political reasons, just before an election, all of a sudden there's an evil and I'm the hero and I'm going to save you. See, parents and everybody, vote for me because I made up an evil. And but the things that they're afraid of, like Rebecca said, aren't even true. They're lies. They're making up a lie, and I agree with hating the lie. I don't think that we should support child abusers, but transgender people aren't inherently child abusers any more than straight or cisgender people are. So it's all a manufactured hate, and people are just afraid and they're just buying into it.
And one thing I think that's really important about a lot of those lies that are being used right now to justify this kind of crackdown, limiting, censorship, banning is, this is all old language. This is all very familiar language, and that's part of what gives it its power. And going to the point of depriving people of their language, what you need in a pluralist society is to keep expanding language. And if you just keep going back to the old language over and over again, you don't really get anywhere. So I think at one level, that's part of what this struggle is about. The language that we already have, is that sufficient to carry us through the world? If your answer is yes, then the new stuff can look pretty bad. But if the answer is no, like we need that new language. And I think that's where, particularly as a professor of English, I think about this a lot for my students. Like how do I not only help them to get that new language, but help them to understand just how deep the need for that new language is, and that it will look different for different people, but that there are deep needs everywhere for that kind of language. Yes, please.
Back on what Rebecca was saying, it's like you ban a book, you didn't read it. Like what? Because my favorite book is about a girl who finds out she likes another girl. It's really good. And I wouldn't be able to read that, and that you just can't do that. That's not fair. I'm going to change that. Just do it.
As a grandmother of little children, these little kids of mine, they have family members that are mixed race marriage, trans, gay. There's a family member with Down syndrome, blind, and a deaf person. I want those kids to be able to see all of that of their family in books. And hopefully they live in New Jersey. Hopefully that won't happen there. But I really appreciate this panel. It's one of the reasons I came here is to hear what you have to say. Thank you for being here.
I think this kind of panel shouldn't be just in the context of a bookstore situation every year. Should be almost every 2 months, every 3 months. Should be, you know, I'm thinking about France because I'm from France, and this type of situation, it's very current, you know, that people talk about that. And last trip I was in France to a friend who passed away, and we were celebrating, you know, in the cemetery. It was really a beautiful event. And we were invited by the relatives and friends, and my friend Jacques, who he was a wonderful guy all his life, and his first wife was there. I didn't know her very well. She started to talk to me, to my friend, and she said how beautiful he was, and she said now after Jack, I was with this couple here, and they were in a room, and they have children. This is say hello, and then she said, now I introduce you to my wife, who was a woman, and then it was of course it was not shocking, but you know, and then what it was a little shocking is like everybody was all together and there was no problem. From the first marriage with my friend, she has a child, and then after that she married the man, she has children, and now she's with this lady, and everybody was there, everybody was not a big deal. I would say it would take time maybe to see that, but
again, thinking of, as a number of people have said, how books help us to see these relationships. They help us to understand, again, have language, have perspective on these relationships, so that as you come to grow close to people like in our lives who are experiencing different changes in their lives, who have different identities, who have different things that they're trying to do, trying to be in the world, a lot of us turn to reading to help us with that. So thinking that part of the way that we get to where it's just a joyful family gathering, when we have it used to be this way and now it's that way, and we're fine with it. We learn that, that's something that books can really help us with.
Yeah.
So we have a few more minutes if anyone has other thoughts, comments, questions.
I just wanted to quickly compare reading a great book, right? One that takes you on a journey into somebody's life, and being on social media where we're all in our silos and we only hear the things we want to hear. You know, a book, but the power of books to break down those walls, to break down those silos, has to do with the power of books to take you on a journey into somebody else's mind and heart and experience, and to broaden your horizons. And that the banning of books seems to relate to some people's need to stop that from happening.
Yeah. One quick professor moment. How many people read The Scarlet Letter in high school? Pretty good number of people were possibly also in college. So I'm an early American literature specialist, so I've studied The Scarlet Letter a lot, I've taught The Scarlet Letter a lot, and it is one of the older banned books in the United States. And the reason why it was banned very, very early in various places was because the main character had sex outside of marriage. In the 1850s, when the book came out, that was not okay. And you know, you think about how many high school students it's kind of grown through the book. At this point, it's about the meaning of America, it's this reflection on its past, and it's the sophisticated symbolism and all these different kinds of things, but it's also getting you into the head of someone who has had an extramarital affair and is trying to think what that means for her. And now people are, okay, so, which, you know, shows in some way, you know, what is at stake with banned books? You know, what if people get to the place in society where they read some, you know, one of these books where people say, well, I don't want that to be normal, and the reaction from people is actually, so? You know, how is that a problem? Where, you know, people now will, you know, have various bones that they'll want to pick with The Scarlet Letter. It will almost never be that one. So it makes me think sometimes, you know, when I hear debates over, you know, whether it's Salman Rushdie's books, whether it's Funhouse, whether it's, you know, a lot of these kinds of, you know, hot button books these days, will we be saying, so what, in 20 years, 30 years, 50 years? Yeah, the books are part of the change, whether people like it or not.
My mother was born in 1929 here in Easton and went to Easton High School, where they were not allowed to read A Tree Grows in Brooklyn because it extramarital affair, let's get married again without divorcing. They were, isn't that funny?
Yeah.
But now,
It's a classic.
yeah.
And I think there are people who don't want to get to a point where we say, so what? Because they, you know, that's the thing, you know. I mean, there are a lot of things where young people, I mean, I've young adult kids, but you know, they shrug, like, who even cares? And like why? Like you know, does it? You know, it is, you know, it isn't. I think we're getting to that point pretty quickly because of the internet and because of that. You know, you know, I think that's good on a lot of levels to say, so what? Live and let live, right? I mean, you know, I would love to get to a point where we say, who cares what they're wearing? Who cares who they love? Who cares, you know, like, you know, so I think that's good. I'm hopeful that young people are way more ahead of than we were, so.
Years ago, when I took the class was in the spirituality, and then when we come to talk about homosexuality, teacher said there's nothing to do with love. You know, he was into religion, but we asked a question, and he said, love has nothing to do with religion, but that's nothing to do with so many things. You know, it's love, it's love. When people feel that love, the walls start to, like the Berlin Wall, you know, people, they were thinking about that. Good point.
I think that's probably a good note to end on. Thank you all again for a really powerful conversation. Thanks again particularly for our panel.